Hello and welcome to The Hero Spouse. I'm Kendra Ruth, here to answer one of your questions about marriage and midlife crisis. Excuse me. Today we have an anonymous female left behind and forward-moving spouse. Her bomb drop was November 6th of 2020, and her date of marriage is 1991. She has a clinging boomerang who is a high-energy replayer. She says, my MLCer prior to bomb drop while at home was a low-energy replayer. At bomb drop, he became a clinging boomerang and a high-energy replayer. Now he is a Vanisher, and he appears to be back to being a low-energy replayer with some high-energy replay activity due to the alienator, as he was fired from his job and money is lower, and she's not privy to his finances. They married due to her pressure, but he has never added her to his finances or insurance, including this car. Do MLCers waiver on contact and energy types while cycling and processing through their journey? Also, does age play a part? Some are in their 50s and they go through this versus some in their 30s or 40s. Okay, there's a few things to unpack right here. So the first thing, though, is it's a little bit confusing because you say prior to bomb drop, low energy replayer. And at bomb drop, became a clinging boomerang. And I'm not sure what that means because maybe you were noticing behaviors, but what are you defining as bomb drop, or how are you defining it? Because MLC does start before bomb drop, but we don't often recognize it unless in hindsight. And there are cases where we do, but typically it's this sudden thing. And the time clock starts, even though the roots were before bomb drop, the time clock starts because that's when they really start to move through the tunnel. It's kind of like before bomb drop, say their father dies and that's their trigger. Then they'll enter the train station. They start to, look at the tickets they're going to get. Bomb drop is when they get on the train. So there's all this time in that train station. Bomb drop, the train moves. The time in the train station, they weren't moving. They weren't trying to escape. At bomb drop, they try to escape. That's when you notice the behavior because they've said something publicly to you, or you've discovered something and so it has become public. So I'm not sure about the low energy replayer, and then he became a clinging boomerang at bomb drop and a high energy. Now he's a Vanisher and appears to be back more low energy. And if he's a Vanisher, what is your input that he's changed his energy type? And I ask that because people think there's a Vanisher and they aren't. And if you have feedback just because of other sources, then yeah, that's valid. But if you have any form of contact, you're not dealing with a Vanisher. And let's say your contact is only due to court and you see each other once a month because you have to meet for court. You wouldn't know that they are a Vanisher until he doesn't have the opportunity to see you. So now you have to have a complete void of opportunities to test whether he's truly a Vanisher or not. I don't know if that was clear. So they can change types. That's not typical. But we see as they advance through their midlife crisis is when that will typically happen. If they are low energy wallower, they'll often try to be a high energy replayer because that's a lot more fun. And they fail at it. They have an affair, and it may not fail, but oftentimes it fails or it limps along. Things just don't work, and they go toward the overt depression, the way we think depression works. And so they seem depressed to us. So hold on. Does age play a part? MLC is 35 to 55 with outliers. I would put 35 in an outlier. I would put 60 in an outlier. So let's say if we said 39, because I'll put it right before as you're approaching that 40th birthday, to 60. And 60 is a little bit of an outlier as well. The average age is 46 for bomb drop. Now, you can have more than one crisis that is in midlife. And if your spouse had gone through a midlife crisis and what I call being yanked out the front, they didn't really progress through and come to a resolution with their crisis, then what I say is they'll go back in and it will be worse. And this doesn't mean they go back in 2 months later. I would call that the same crisis. 10 years later. And suddenly, there it is again. You may have felt completely healed from the first time, or you may have felt they just came home and things were functional. They worked, but they weren't sparkling. They weren't great. And when I say sparkling, I don't mean that fairy tale of, oh, we have this amazing marriage now. You might have a normal marriage now. But they were just kind of like, bleh, not great. And maybe low energy, low level of depression that just flies over the radar or under the radar. So you don't quite think about it that way. And you're just so glad that everything is back. So they can be going through different things in their 40s, 50s, and 30s, 40s, and 50s as well. Is there part of their midlife crisis part of empty nest? If their dad dies, and there are ages where that may be more likely to happen, depending on the age difference in parents and that sort of thing. What kind of aging issues are they dealing with that are different in there at 55 than they are at 40? But in general, we have a general script, and each one that goes through it is going to get more and more unique as they go through the crisis. What I see with the contact types, sometimes it is the natural progression of moving apart. Even if you're standing, it's been 1 year and they're still very close. And then 2 years, then 3 years, you start to detach more and more. You get more of a life outside of the identity you may have put on being a stander, which is a dangerous thing. Outside of standing, outside of pining away, you're healing. Even if you don't stop standing, you have a life that is separate from your spouse's life now. And when I say you have a life, I mean you have a good one. You're living it. And there isn't the same need to look back and have that. And so they may feel or sense the same thing as well. Now, sometimes it's the alienator. Sometimes they might be changing or seeming to change their contact type because the alienator is controlling them, which is very common. And that goes to, we can't see what's going on behind closed doors. We really don't know. So yes, they do waver in contact in energy types, not as much as people think. There's often a steadiness, but it's not so much wavering, and you're getting somewhere he's coming back and forth in these types, it seems. But more as life goes on, and that really is what it comes down to. So while at home, you were a low-energy wallower. At home, MLCers are, or not more, I don't know if I would say more often, but low-energy wallowers are more likely than the other kind to stay at home or to stay home longer than the others before they move out. So if we have an at-home MLCer, I have a greater expectation that that one is going to be low-energy wallower. And men, upon leaving, more than women, are more likely to stay close contactors. Women, they may, but they're just as likely not to. Women are more likely than men, not than other women, but that did stay home or didn't, but than men to be. We have more distant contact in women, even those who stayed at home. And women, of course, because of the kids, are more likely to stay at home for a longer period as well, whereas men leave quickly. But that goes back to women often being more decisive. They made their decision years ago sometimes, even if they weren't aware that they made their decision years ago. And that's something that's not necessarily connected to midlife crisis. So we see a lot of that make sudden decisions, but sometimes not midlife crisis, they've just given up. And the man then thinks, oh, well, she gave up, or he doesn't realize she gave up. She stopped nagging. She stopped complaining. She stopped criticizing. When a woman does that, it might mean she's given up. Might mean there's no point in it. I'll just bide my time until the time is right. And sometimes they have a set date when the kids are out of school and they move away, when this certain milestone happens. And then that comes, and that's it for them. And they don't discuss it. Now, that is not part of midlife crisis. That's a general women leaving. But some midlife women will fit that. Okay. But we're not dealing with a midlife woman right now anyway. Since he married the alienator, I would wonder about this becoming a vanisher, becoming a clinging boomerang. I also would wonder how you're defining those terms. How do you, when you say, oh, he's a clinging boomerang now, how long are you measuring to say clinging boomerang? And when he becomes a vanisher, how long are you measuring to say vanisher? Or is he just come and go? He comes in for fits and sticks around, and then he's not. And how much of that is influenced by the alienator? Because I think a lot of the key is going to be he married the alienator. And he married due to pressure, which is probably means emotional blackmail is going on. Pressure is another way of saying control. Okay, so he's probably has an electronic leash. Other than that, there's not enough information, but it would be easier to tell given like how you're defining the terms. Okay, but I hope this was helpful, and I'll see everybody in the next question.